From the dojo to the octagon, this is Budocast, your source for the latest in martial arts news, culture, and competition. From breaking fight results to evolving techniques, we cover it all. Let's get into it.
You know, usually when we look at like a medical diagnosis, there's this comforting expectation of pure precision.
Right, like it's a hard science?
Exactly. It feels like engineering. Like you break your arm, the doctor puts you under the x-ray machine, the film shows that jagged white line, and they just point at it. It is clear. It is undeniable. You are looking at the foundational structure, and there are, absolutely no debates about what you are seeing.
Which is how we all wish the sport operated.
Yeah. But then, you step into the modern landscape of mixed martial arts, particularly looking at the slate of events dominating the summer of 2026, and suddenly that x-ray machine is, it's completely malfunctioning.
It's just showing static at this point. Yeah, totally. We are trying to examine the health and the structure of the sport, but the pure bones of the competition are entirely tangled up with the connective tissue of billion-dollar corporate maneuvering.
I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the diagnostic landscape you are describing has never been murkier. The sources we are analyzing for today's deep dive, they really paint a picture of an ecosystem where the actual physical
stuff happening inside the cage?
Right. The martial arts happening on the canvas is frequently overshadowed by the sheer noise surrounding it. I mean, we are dissecting a period where promotions are actively scrambling to handle public relations chaos.
Oh, massive chaos.
Where dominant champions are fighting against the corporate current just to secure their legacies, and where intensely personal vendettas are fundamentally altering the psychological landscape of title fights. It's a collision of human emotion, athletic purity, and just cold boardroom strategy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our primary mission for today's deep dive is to explore that exact clash. The pure, unpredictable sport of MMA versus the, highly sanitized, incredibly lucrative business of MMA.
It's a massive contrast.
It really is. And we have 4 major stories unfolding right now that perfectly illustrate this friction. I want to jump straight into the most volatile in-cage narrative on the current calendar. I mean, the main event of the highly exclusive UFC White House Freedom 250 card scheduled for June 14th.
Yeah, that one is just incredible.
We are looking at the undefeated lightweight champion, Ilia Topuria, walking in with that pristine 0 on his record, defending his belt against the interim champion, the veteran Justin Gaethje.
Purely from a tactical standpoint, like just setting all the noise aside for a moment, this is a fascinating stylistic puzzle. You have Topuria, whose boxing mechanics and grappling integrations have looked utterly flawless across 17 professional walks to the cage, going up against Gaethje. And Gaethje brings a completely different variable to the equation. I mean, he brings legendary forward pressure, some of the most devastating leg kicks in the history of the division, and just a sheer terrifying durability.
He's a zombie in there sometimes.
He really is. But what makes this matchup so compelling right now is that the tactical breakdown is taking a backseat to the psychological warfare. The vitriol in the build-up to this specific fight has, honestly, it's eclipsed the stylistic intrigue.
Oh, the temperature in the room for this one is off the charts. And what genuinely surprises me is that both of these athletes are historically known for being incredibly respectful competitors.
Yeah, they really are.
Right. Now, neither of them fits that classic, pro wrestling mold of a loudmouth trash talker trying to sell pay-per-views with cheap insults. They are guys who historically let the violence speak for itself. But the lead-up to this White House event has morphed into something incredibly hostile. It's like watching a tense, strategic game of psychological chess, where one player suddenly decides to just flip the board over, throw the pieces across the room, and set the table on fire.
The speed of that escalation is what really stands out in the reporting. I mean, this wasn't a slow burn of generic competitive banter. It crossed the Rubicon from professional confidence into deeply personal territory almost instantly.
So let's trace the breadcrumbs here based on our sources, because the chain of events is just wild. Supposedly, this entire inferno started with a passing comment from Justin Gaethje's father, who referred to Topuria as a short guy.
Which is...
I mean, in the grand lexicon of combat sports insults, that barely registers.
Yeah, it is incredibly mild.
It is. But Topuria, who carries himself with this immense, untouchable pride, he did not let it slide.
Right.
He responded by publicly promising to explicitly knock Gaethje out and to do it in front of his father.
Which fundamentally alters the stakes of the contest. In the unwritten rulebook of combat sports, bringing family members into the crosshairs, even merely verbally, is a distinct threshold.
It's a huge line to cross.
Right. The moment you introduce a father sitting in the front row into your pre-fight visualization of a knockout, the entire emotional architecture of the fight shifts from competitive ambition to punitive anger. You were no longer just trying to win a belt, you were trying to humiliate another human being.
And Gaethje retaliated by going straight to the nuclear option. He hit back by publicly mocking Topuria's recent divorce. From there, the dam just broke.
Well, it's ugly.
We saw a furious exchange on X,
Yeah.
and then that incredibly volatile split-screen video call on Pat McAfee's show where things just went completely off the rails. To go back to the chess analogy, it's one thing to say my left hook is faster than your overhand right, but bringing in fathers and dredging up the pain of a recent divorce, that's scorched earth.
It really is.
But here is where I am struggling, and let me push back on how Topuria is handling this. On the McAfee show, Topuria is completely leaning into his anger. He is doubling down, absolutely insisting that the fight will end in the first 5 minutes.
Which is a bold, bold claim against Gaethje.
Right. He stated, and I am quoting the transcript here, never going to be a second or third round. That's not going to happen. I'm going to knock you out in the first round. Does making such a highly specific, ego-driven promise trap him? Like, does forcing himself into a corner where he absolutely must get a first-round finish cause an undefeated champion to fight recklessly?
That is the precise psychological trap Justin Gaethje is meticulously setting. When you analyze Gaethje's rhetoric throughout this buildup, it is incredibly calculated. He isn't just throwing insults. He is painting a very specific portrait of his opponent.
What do you mean?
Well, Gaethje stated Topuria smells his own fart and thinks he is God. He is publicly characterizing Topuria as a narcissist who has become intoxicated by his own hype, a man who believes his undefeated record makes him a deity in the cage. And Gaethje's stated objective isn't merely to win a decision, he explicitly promised to make him look human.
Make him look human. I have to say, in a sport built on cultivating an aura of invincibility, that is a chilling phrase.
It is profound because it implies the dismantling of an ego, not just the breaking of a body. And this psychological framing matters immensely for the physiological mechanics of what will actually happen when that cage door locks.
Oh, for sure.
Gaethje is openly broadcasting his blueprint for victory. He told Topuria directly on that call, because when it goes to the second round, the third round, you'd be like, oh, I talked a lot of shit. Gaethje is not predicting a quick, clean finish for himself. He's outlining a strategy of attrition.
He wants to drag him deep.
Exactly. He intends to drag an undefeated, highly emotional champion into deep waters, whether the inevitable early storm where Topuria is desperate to fulfill his knockout promise, and then just watch as the realization sets in.
Because if you guarantee the world a first-round knockout, and you throw everything but the kitchen sink at this guy, and the horn sounds for the end of the first round.
And Justin Gaethje's still standing there.
Yes. He is still standing there staring across the cage at you. Suddenly, the psychological burden shifts entirely onto your shoulders. You have to walk back to your stool, sit down, and face the horrifying reality that your prophecy just failed.
And that psychological realization carries a devastating physiological cost. I want you, the listener, to really visualize the biological processes happening in a fighter's body under these specific conditions.
Right, because it's not just mental.
No, not at all. When you are fighting out of pure, unadulterated hatred, when the guy across from you has mocked your broken marriage, your body does not process stress the way it normally would in a sparring session. You experience a monumental surge of adrenaline. The sympathetic nervous system triggers the classic fight-or-flight response, basically flooding the bloodstream with cortisol and epinephrine.
It's the body preparing for a life-or-death struggle, just hitting the gas pedal to the floorboards.
Precisely. But in the context of a mixed martial arts championship bout scheduled for 25 minutes, hitting the gas pedal too early is catastrophic. It leads to what fighters call an adrenaline dump.
Yeah, we've seen that ruin so many title fights.
If Topuria headhunts in the opening minutes, throwing every overhand right in combination with absolute maximum velocity to fulfill his ego-driven promise, he is rapidly burning through his fast-twitch muscle fibers. He is depleting his cellular oxygen reserves and flooding his muscles with lactic acid at an entirely unsustainable rate.
So he's basically sprinting the first mile of a marathon.
A marathon where the other guy is actively trying to take your head off? If Topuria doesn't secure that finish, by the middle of the second round, his shoulders will burn, his breathing will become labored, and his arms will literally feel like they are filled with wet cement.
And Gaethje feeds on that.
Gaethje is a veteran who has survived some of the most grueling, violent wars in the history of the lightweight division. He knows exactly how to navigate that early onslaught. He's banking on capitalizing on an opponent who is exhausted and emotionally compromised because they let their anger dictate their pacing.
It is brilliant, twisted psychology. I mean, Gaethje is essentially handing Topuria a shovel, pointing to the center of the octagon and daring him to dig his own grave in the first 5 minutes. It's an incredible narrative. But as much as we're anticipating the violence scheduled inside the cage at this White House event, it is almost being rivaled by the sheer unadulterated chaos of what is happening outside the cage regarding the guest list.
That is a whole other mess.
Which brings us to our second story. The politics of VIP access and the controversies surrounding who is explicitly barred from attending Freedom 250.
It is a totally different theater of warfare, but the stakes for the overarching business model of the promotion are arguably just as high.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the UFC middleweight champion, Sean Strickland, who sits at 31-7 and is undeniably one of the most visible, polarizing faces of the entire company, claims he has been explicitly denied entry to this historic White House card.
Yeah.
Now, before we dive into the mechanics of this, I need to speak directly to you, the listener, to issue a mandatory disclaimer. Rumors are circulating heavily that this alleged ban is due to incendiary remarks Strickland recently made regarding Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We must make it abundantly clear. We are remaining completely neutral on this topic. We are not taking a side on the political issue, nor are we endorsing or condemning the viewpoints of the fighter or the political figures involved. We are simply reporting the facts from the source material regarding what is rumored to be causing the friction between Strickland and the UFC brass.
That boundary is essential. Our analytical focus here is strictly on how a massive combat sports promotion handles a public relations crisis involving one of its champions and how that friction impacts the fighter's individual brand.
So, with the political neutrality firmly established, let's examine the PR machinery at work here. Because Dana White, the UFC CEO, stepped in front of the media and completely dismissed the rumors of a political ban.
He had to.
Yeah, he attempted to spin the narrative, blaming the strict 4,300 ticket capacity of the venue. He deflected attention with a joke, stating that Strickland isn't banned for geopolitical reasons. He is simply, quote, banned from humanity. Dana insisted nobody is officially banned and claimed Strickland had already voiced that he didn't even want to go.
It is a textbook execution of corporate crisis management. You protect the unprecedented political access the company has secured by minimizing the controversy. You deflect a serious ideological question with humor, and you quickly pivot the conversation back to mundane logistics, in this case, venue capacity.
But Strickland refused to play along with the corporate script. He immediately countered Dana White's narrative on X, and he brought actual receipts. He stated that UFC executive Hunter Campbell had explicitly promised him a spot on camera at the event.
Which directly contradicts the boss.
Completely. He even pointed out that the UFC's own production crew had filmed him for the embedded vlog series, talking about his attendance. But then, according to Strickland, the UFC called him back to inform him that he, quote, wasn't cleared by the White House.
Wow.
It is like getting uninvited to an incredibly exclusive VIP wedding, where the host goes on national television and blames the fire marshal for the capacity limits, but you literally have text messages from the wedding planner proving you were specifically cut from the list.
The wedding analogy is quite apt. It exposes the inherent, unavoidable friction that occurs when a highly unpredictable rogue asset like Sean Strickland collides with the deeply sanitized, risk-averse machinery of a White House event.
Oil in water.
Exactly. The UFC is trying to present a polished, corporate-friendly product to political dignitaries, and Strickland's entire brand is built on being unpolished and uncontrollable.
But I have a question for you, because his reaction is what puzzles me the most. Any other fighter on the roster would be throwing an absolute tantrum about missing out on the most historic networking event in the promotion's history. They'd be furious about losing the camera time.
Sure, most would.
But Strickland is practically laughing about it. He joked that he wouldn't want to sit with Kash Patel anyway, and he literally typed the words, "I'd ban me too."
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't he furious about being sidelined?
Because for a fighter with Sean Strickland's specific persona, this snub is the single greatest marketing gift the promotion could possibly hand him. Consider the architecture of Strickland's brand. He is the ultimate anti-establishment figure in modern MMA.
Yeah, he really is.
He portrays himself as the unfiltered, blue-collar truth teller who vehemently refuses to bow to corporate interests, media training, or political correctness.
He's the guy who constantly reminds everyone he trains in a hot garage and drives a beat-up Hyundai.
Exactly. His currency with his fan base is his authenticity as an outsider. Now, run the thought experiment of the alternative scenario. Imagine if the UFC actually succeeded in putting him in a tailored suit, sat him politely in the front row at the White House next to senators and dignitaries, and forced him to smile and wave for the broadcast cameras.
Oh man, that would look so wrong.
It would be catastrophic for his image. It would visually transform him into the very thing he rails against, a corporate shill playing the game for the elites.
He would look domesticated.
Precisely. But by being officially or even just unofficially banned from the White House, his rebel persona receives the ultimate validation. It perfectly aligns with the narrative he sells to his audience, that the establishment is terrified of his unfiltered voice.
So he wins either way.
He doesn't need the traditional networking opportunities because his brand thrives on outrage and opposition. So Dana White protects the UFC's multi-billion-dollar corporate relationships by downplaying the political angle as a simple space limit. But Strickland is perfectly happy to loudly claim he was silenced because it elevates him into a martyr for free speech in the eyes of his followers.
It's brilliant.
It is a bizarre, highly functional, symbiotic relationship where both the promotion and the fighter achieve their primary goals by appearing to be at war with one another.
The UFC protects its VIP access, and Strickland probably gets to print a brand new line of merchandise that says, "Banned by the White House." It is the business of MMA operating at peak efficiency, just extracting value from chaos.
And it serves as a perfect bridge to the central theme of our analysis today. The constant tug of war between the fiercely independent individuals who actually bleed in the cage and the towering corporate entity attempting to package that violence for a mainstream sanitized audience.
Before we dive deeper into how this corporate maneuvering affects the actual championship fights on the calendar, shout out to our sponsors. First up, Elite Sports, leaders in premium fightwear for BJJ and MMA. Whether you're rolling or striking, they've got gear built to move with you. Check them out at elitesports.com. And if you're a school owner looking to optimize your dojo's performance, you need to check out Lotus by Open Black Belt. It's the ultimate management software for tracking ranks, attendance, and billing. They are currently offering a free trial to our listeners. Streamline your business so you can spend more time on the mats. Visit openblackbelt.com to start your trial today. You can find links for both in the show notes. And if you've got a story, news tip, or question, send it to us at Budocast.com.
So we have examined the chaos. We have seen how deeply personal, emotional vendettas are driving the tactical pacing of the Topuria Gaethje bout and how sophisticated PR spin is managing the Sean Strickland controversy. But this raises a compelling scenario. What happens when a fighter simply refuses to engage with the noise? What occurs when a dominant champion attempts to force the corporate machine to operate on pure meritocracy, stripping away the PR and the drama?
That brings us to Alexander the Great Volkanovski. And honestly, analyzing Volkanovski's current blueprint is like a breath of fresh air after wading through all the drama, but it is also incredibly frustrating to watch unfold.
His approach represents a completely divergent philosophy regarding how an elite athlete should navigate their career trajectory in the modern era.
Let's lay out the facts from our sources. Volkanovski, the two-time featherweight champion, recently secured another incredibly dominant victory over Diego Lopes in their highly anticipated rematch at UFC 320 SOF.
He looked phenomenal in that fight.
He really did. Following that win, he signed a fresh, multi-fight contract. He has emphatically stated he has zero plans to retire, and he is actively eyeing a return to the Octagon somewhere between August and September.
Yeah.
He is specifically aiming to headline the UFC 331 pay-per-view. But he is drawing a very rigid line in the sand regarding his opponent. He is strictly demanding to fight the undefeated #1 contender, Movsar Evloev.
A demand that completely ignores the modern trend of seeking out the most lucrative, media-friendly matchups.
Exactly.
Evloev is currently riding an incredibly dominant 10-fight win streak within the UFC, and he just recently took Lerone Murphy's undefeated record at the UFC London event.
So,
On paper, Evloev is unequivocally the most deserving challenger in the division based on pure competitive metrics.
right. And Volkanovski is quoted as saying he has a duty as a champion to ensure no one is fast-tracked to a title shot. He wants the most deserving guy. But here is the major roadblock. Volkanovski is currently stuck in the corporate waiting room. He wants the fight locked in, but he's forced to wait for the UFC matchmakers to finish dealing with the monumental bottleneck caused by these VIP mega events.
The logjam is real.
The corporate machinery is entirely focused on executing Freedom 250 at the White House, and then turning right around to promote UFC 329, which features the return of Conor McGregor against Max Holloway.
Two massive, massive undertakings.
So in a sport that often feels like it's taking cues from reality television, Volkanovski is acting like a traditional martial arts master. He's standing at the front of the dojo, arms crossed, demanding that you clear out every single top student in the room before you are granted the honor of facing him.
It is a highly principled stance that speaks volumes about how he views his legacy. However, it vividly highlights the exact friction between sport and business we are dissecting today.
But let me push back on Volkanovski's strategy here, because from a purely pragmatic career management standpoint, is he actually hurting himself? We are talking about an aging champion competing in a lighter weight class, where fast twitch reflexes and sheer speed are historically the very first things to decline.
That is a biological fact.
Is he actively damaging his own career window by patiently sitting on the sidelines, waiting for the UFC brass to finish catering to megastars like McGregor?
Yeah.
Why should a dominant, highly active champion be put on indefinite hold just because the executives are busy organizing VIP guest lists for politicians?
Your frustration highlights the fundamental clash between the sport's intrinsic competitive integrity and its extrinsic entertainment value. From Volkanovski's perspective, the system should operate as a strict meritocracy. You win the fights, you climb the regional ladder, you beat the top 5, and you get the shot.
Right, like any other sport.
Exactly. He wants the schedule, as he said, locked in. But from the UFC's perspective, as a global corporate entity, they are ultimately in the business of selling spectacle. A hyper-exclusive White House card or a Conor McGregor pay-per-view generates exponentially more revenue, media impressions, and stock momentum than a purely meritocratic featherweight title defense.
I mean, the numbers don't lie.
They don't. The UFC prioritizes the massive spectacles because they have a fiduciary duty to appease shareholders and broadcast partners. Volkanovski, despite his greatness, is essentially a high-functioning gear in a machine that is temporarily being operated to produce a completely different kind of product.
But it's more than just the frustration of waiting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's look closely at who he is waiting for. He is demanding Movsar Evloev.
This raises an incredibly important question regarding athletic motivation. Why is Volkanovski, a champion who frankly has absolutely nothing left to prove to the critics, actively campaigning for what is almost certainly the single most dangerous, grueling fight available in his division?
Because Evloev isn't just a tough guy with a good record. He is a complete stylistic nightmare for anyone.
Exactly. Evloev is an undefeated, suffocating chain wrestler. He possesses relentless cardio, an iron chin, and a tactical discipline that rarely allows for spectacular moments. In his own assessment, Volkanovski referred to Evloev as a curveball.
A huge curveball.
Now, in the contemporary era of combat sports, when a champion achieves Volkanovski's level of tenure and stardom, they almost universally try to leverage their position to secure a money fight.
Right, cash out.
They want an opponent with a massive mainstream following to drive pay-per-view points. Or, strategically, they want a challenger whose style favors a spectacular highlight reel knockout.
They want a striker. They want a guy who will stand in the center of the octagon, keep his hands a little too low, and willingly trade punches. They emphatically do not want a guy who is going to dive for their legs, press them against the chain link fence, and force them into a grueling 25-minute isometric grappling match.
A suffocating, grinding wrestling match against a relatively low-profile, undefeated contender is the absolute antithesis of a money fight. It is incredibly high risk and a remarkably low reward from a pure business and marketing standpoint.
If he loses everything.
Right. If Volkanovski loses, he surrenders the championship to an athlete who currently doesn't carry the mainstream star power to elevate Volkanovski's own brand in a rematch. So why do it?
Yeah.
Why actively campaign for the hardest, least lucrative stylistic challenge available?
Because for Volkanovski, the belt isn't a prop. It's about legacy.
It is entirely about preserving the purity of the martial arts ethos. Volkanovski is attempting to inject order, legitimacy, and honor back into a system that is increasingly defined by social media metrics and artificial drama.
That's refreshing, honestly.
It is. By demanding Evelev, Volkanovski is trying to force the UFC to respect the sport over the spectacle, even if just for one night on his terms. He is communicating a clear message. I don't care about the follower counts. I don't care about the press conference trash talk. Bring me the man who has undeniably earned the right to stand across from me. It is a profound, almost anachronistic statement about what a world championship is actually supposed to represent.
It's a beautiful sentiment, but it also serves as a stark, undeniable reminder of how much leverage the UFC megastars, the McGregors, the athletes, handpicked for the White House hold over the promotion's entire schedule. Volkanovski, a historically dominant champion, has to patiently wait his turn in the foyer because the business machine is busy generating capital elsewhere.
Right.
So what happens when a rival promotion observes that exact dynamic, this heavy reliance on massive, highly disruptive individual megastars, and decides they want to engineer a completely different kind of corporate structure?
That transitions us perfectly to our final source of analysis today, focusing on the Professional Fighters League, the PFL, and their highly controversial, incredibly ambitious ecosystem strategy.
We are pivoting from the UFC,
Yeah.
where transcendent stars have the power to dictate the entire calendar, to the PFL, where the executives are actively trying to demonstrate that their promotion doesn't need to rely on individual stars at all. Let's look at the facts surrounding the PFL lightweight champion, Usman Nurmagomedov. He is sitting on an incredible, unblemished record of 21-0.
Incredible record.
He is scheduled to face Archie Colgan, who is also an undefeated prospect, at 13-0 on July 31st at the UBS Arena in New York.
Two undefeated fighters colliding in a championship bout. From a purely matchmaking perspective, it is a phenomenal offering.
It is spectacular. But here is the towering corporate bombshell hidden in the details. This July 31st bout is the final fight on Nurmagomedov's current contract with the PFL.
Yeah, that's kicker.
And PFL CEO John Martin publicly revealed to the media that they haven't even initiated contract renewal negotiations. Martin is explicitly adopting a wait-and-see approach. He told reporters that while Nurmagomedov is undeniably a fantastic champion, the PFL must put the brand first and foremost.
Which is quite a statement.
Very much so. He spoke at length about cultivating a portfolio of fighters and building an ecosystem, deliberately pushing back against the idea of relying on one or two massive stars to represent the entire organization's value.
He is openly telegraphing to the combat sports world that the PFL is genuinely willing to let an undefeated 21-0 champion, a man who carries one of the most famous, respected surnames in the history of martial arts, test the waters of free agency.
So what does this all mean? Because honestly, I could not believe what I was reading when I saw those quotes. This sounds exactly like a baseball manager looking at a star player who just hit 70 home runs in a single season, walking up to the press podium and saying, yeah, we'll see if we feel like paying to keep him next year. The logo on the front of the jersey is what really matters, not the name on the back.
It's a bold strategy.
How on earth can a promotion that is still trying to capture market share let a 21-year Nurmagomedov casually walk into free agency? Let me push back on this entirely because I am highly skeptical of the narrative. Is John Martin actually telling the truth about prioritizing the brand, or is this just a very public, incredibly risky negotiation tactic designed to avoid paying Nurmagomedov a massive premium on his next contract?
It is highly probable that it is a strategic blend of both, but we must take Martin's ecosystem philosophy seriously because it fundamentally attempts to rewrite how mixed martial arts has been promoted for the last quarter century.
How so?
Let's analyze the economic mechanics of the PFL's long-term business strategy. By stepping in front of the microphones and stating his legacy is clear, but we just have to wait and see, the PFL is sending a powerful, calculated message to their entire locker room. They are signaling to every single athlete on the roster and every manager negotiating on their behalf that absolutely no individual is bigger than the league itself.
It's an ultimate power play to control labor costs.
It is a sweeping power play. They are attempting to mimic the traditional franchise structures of the NFL or the NBA. When you watch the NBA, you tune in for the Los Angeles Lakers or the Boston Celtics. Yes, the fans love the individual players, but the franchise is the enduring, bankable asset that commands the billion-dollar television rights.
But MMA isn't basketball.
Exactly. In combat sports, historically, that model has never worked. The fighter is the franchise. When Muhammad Ali stepped into the ring, the audience didn't care who promoted the bout. They paid to watch Ali.
Exactly. You don't root for the promotion, you root for the fighter.
The PFL is trying to shatter that historical paradigm. Martin explicitly stated they are trying to evolve the sport into a system that survives the departure or retirement of any single athlete. But this strategic pivot raises an incredible paradox when you compare them to the industry leader.
Which is what?
The paradox is that the UFC built its impenetrable, bulletproof global brand precisely by cultivating, exploiting, and heavily marketing transcendent megastars.
Oh, totally.
The UFC is the most valuable property in combat sports today because they spent years riding the colossal pay-per-view numbers generated by Ronda Rousey, Brock Lesnar, and Conor McGregor. And as we just discussed with Volkanovski's predicament, those megastars like McGregor still possess enough gravitational pull to bottleneck the entire UFC schedule today.
Yep, the stars run the show.
The UFC didn't become a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut by presenting a faceless portfolio of interchangeable athletes. They achieved global dominance by marketing absolute supernovas of personality and violence.
So the PFL is trying to skip the hardest step in the process. They want the corporate stability and the brand loyalty of the modern UFC without having to go through the messy, incredibly expensive, unpredictable process of actually building a Conor McGregor of their own.
Precisely. The critical question for the future of their business is, can the PFL successfully execute this brand-first model without first establishing irreplaceable, transcendent stars to draw the casual mainstream eyes to the product in the first place?
I mean, it's a huge question mark.
If you let a generational talent like Usman Nurmagomedov walk over to the UFC to save money on a contract, you might successfully prove to your investors that your brand is bigger than any one fighter. But you simultaneously lose the exact caliber of elite, undefeated talent that makes your brand worth watching on a Saturday night.
It seems crazy to me.
It is a profoundly dangerous economic gamble. They are placing a massive bet that the structural format of the PFL, the seasonal point system, the playoffs, the $1 million championship tournament, is inherently more compelling to the viewing audience than the specific athletes competing within that structure.
It is the ultimate real-time test of the business versus the sport. Are fans tuning in because they love the PFL rule set and the seasonal format, or are they tuning in specifically to watch a Nurmagomedov showcase his grappling? I suppose we're going to find out very soon.
And this gamble perfectly mirrors the friction we've identified across all our sources today.
Let's bring all of these threads together for the listener.
Yeah.
We set out at the beginning of this deep dive to explore the chaotic balancing act of modern mixed martial arts, this immense, undeniable friction between the pure sport and the sprawling corporate business. And looking at the landscape of the summer of 2026, that friction is firing on all cylinders. In the Topuria and Gaethje matchup, we observe the deeply personal, incredibly dangerous emotional stakes of combat. We see athletes weaponizing each other's personal lives to force tactical, physiological errors inside the cage, prioritizing violence over sportsmanship.
When we examine the Sean Strickland saga, we see the complex political and public relations realities of a promotion desperately trying to sanitize its inherently chaotic athletes to secure unprecedented, highly lucrative access, such as a White House event.
Then you have Volkanovski, who stands as an almost solitary beacon of pure competitive spirit. He is actively demanding meritocracy and campaigning for the hardest stylistic matchups available, even while the corporate machine puts his legacy on hold to cater to bigger spectacles.
Exactly.
And finally, you have the PFL, representing the cold, hard corporate strategy of the ecosystem, willing to casually gamble an undefeated champion just to prove a boardroom point about brand supremacy and labor leverage.
It is a fascinating, multifaceted landscape that defies simple explanations, and it leaves us with a final thought for you to really mull over. As the UFC continues to aggressively move toward these hyper-exclusive, VIP-only events like the Freedom 250 White House card events, where the average loyal fan couldn't possibly afford or acquire a ticket, and as rival promotions like the PFL actively maneuver toward a faceless brand ecosystem where the athletes are treated as interchangeable portfolio assets, what happens to the hardcore fan?
That's the million-dollar question.
Are we rapidly entering an era where the actual martial arts, the blood, the sweat, and the years of honed technique happening inside the cage are merely just a colorful, violent backdrop for high-level corporate maneuvering and reality TV drama?
It really makes you wonder if that X-ray machine we talked about at the beginning is showing us the healthy, growing bones of a martial arts competition, or if we are just looking at the rigid skeleton of a massive corporate conglomerate that happens to sell fights. It's a lot to think about as we head into these summer matchups. That's it for this episode of Budocast. Thanks for joining us as we break down the latest in martial arts. We'll be back soon with more news, stories, and insights. Until then, train hard, stay humble,